All right, so you want to avoid a career-ending injury like what happened to Kevin Durant, right? I mean, his Achilles, that was rough.
Yeah,
So we're looking at some training stuff. Or whether you're playing basketball or just living life, we got to move.
right.
And we've got this article, right? It's a strength coach. He's been doing this forever. He's like, whoa, there's some red flags I keep seeing in these programs.
Yeah.
And this isn't just for, the pros. It's for everybody who wants to move well and not end up on the sidelines.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he kind of breaks down the problem. There's like three big things, right? The first thing is limited range of motion strength training.
Okay, limited range of motion strength training.
He's basically saying a lot of athletes will build strength, but only in a really specific range of motion. And that's setting them up for problems.
So they're strong, but not in every way they need to be strong.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like, if you can only move in certain ways and life throws you a curveball, something you didn't expect,
Oh, for sure.
and you have to move outside of that range, that's where the risk is.
So, you're only prepared for certain things, and then something unexpected happens, and boom.
Exactly. Think about it, like your muscles and your tendons. Those are like powerful springs. And if you're only training them in a limited range, it's kind of like keeping those springs compressed all the time.
Oh.
And then they lose their ability to kind of bounce back,
Makes sense.
when you need that full range of motion. And then you're more prone to injury. So that's like the first big issue he talks about.
Okay, so limiting the range of motion, that's number one. What's number two?
All right, so the second thing is almost like the flip side of that.
Okay.
It's increasing your range of motion, but without building strength in that new range.
Oh, interesting.
It's like if you have a rubber band, right?
Yeah.
And you stretch it out, you make it longer, but you don't make it thicker, it's more likely to snap, right? So you might be able to touch your toes, right? But if your muscles aren't strong enough to actually support that range of motion when you're moving, when you're under stress,
Yeah, you're just flexible but not strong.
yeah, you're vulnerable.
Gotcha.
Vulnerable to injury.
Okay, so it's like too far in either direction is bad, right?
Yeah.
You need that balance.
Yeah, you need the range of motion and the strength to back it up.
Makes sense.
So that's number two.
Okay, what's his third issue?
The third problem he talks about is a lack of what he calls high tension exercises.
High tension.
Yeah, so these are exercises that are really about building that reactive muscle control. So think of like a really heavy squat, right?
Yeah.
When you're at the bottom of that squat, your muscles are under maximum tension.
For sure, you're feeling it there.
And they're ready to explode upwards, right? So that's what he means by high tension.
Yeah.
And a lot of programs, he says, they kind of neglect this really important part of training.
Oh, interesting.
And then athletes are not prepared for those forces, for the quick changes in direction. And it happens in sports.
Yeah, right.
And in everyday life.
I never thought about it that way, but it's true. Like, you trip, you got to react.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's got these three issues he's seeing.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into the juicy part.
Yeah.
Where he starts to look at Kevin Durant. And you say you had some stuff about his actual training, right?
Yeah, he uses Kevin Durant as kind of like a case study
Okay.
to show how these problems can actually happen in, the real world. High profile case, he looks at his program, he critiques some of the exercises, some of the coaching cues, and it gets real interesting.
Yeah, this is where, everyone loves a little gossip.
Right.
But obviously, we're not here to bash KD. We're trying to figure out what happened, maybe learn something from it.
Right, exactly.
So what kind of exercises is he talking about? Like, give me the dirt.
All right, so one thing he mentions is unstable surface training. So this is like when you're doing exercises on a wobbly surface, like a BOSU ball, you see that everywhere.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And he's saying he actually thinks these can detrain athletes and make them more likely to get hurt.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I thought those were good for you. Like all the balance stuff, core stability, I see it everywhere.
Yeah, and there's a nuance here, right? He's talking about the difference between training for balance and training for stability.
Huh. Okay. So what's the difference?
Balance, that's about staying still, not falling over.
Yeah.
But stability is about how you control your movement, how you resist forces, like when you have to change direction quickly.
So like standing on a wobble board is one thing.
Yeah.
But then like running and having to cut to avoid someone, that's a whole other thing.
Exactly. And he's saying you need to develop strength and stability through, a full range of motion, under load.
Okay, so like in the real world.
Yeah, if you want real resilience.
Okay, so he's not a fan of the BOSU ball.
Right.
What else is he calling out?
He also criticizes some of the coaching cues, the things that coaches say that he thinks are actually like harmful.
Hmm.
So there's this quote from Kevin Durant's strength coach, and he's talking about how he'd keep his hand on KD's knee when he was doing lunges.
I've heard that before, like to protect the knee or something.
Yeah, right, like to stop it from going past his toes.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
He says that by doing that, by stopping the knee from going forward, you're actually limiting the stretch on the calf and the Achilles.
And
You're keeping it short. You're keeping that muscle short.
And then we're back to the rubber band.
Exactly right. If you keep it short for too long, it gets weak.
Gotcha.
It can't handle the stress, more likely to tear.
Okay.
And he actually says the opposite is better.
Really?
Yeah, he says you should drive the knee forward to get that stretch on the calf and the Achilles.
I always thought that was bad for your knee, though.
Hmm.
Like going too far forward.
Yeah, but he says that by training your joints through that full range of motion, you're actually building resilience. He compares it to like a car suspension.
Hmm.
You know, if your shocks are always stiff, they're never fully extending, eventually they wear out. They can't absorb the impacts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's the same with your muscles and tendons, right? If they're always trained short, they can't handle those sudden forces and then boom, injury.
So it's like we're trying to protect our bodies, but we're actually making them more fragile in the process.
Yeah, it's like wrapping yourself in bubble wrap.
Exactly. You never get any stronger that way.
Right. You got to let your body, experience the world, get a little banged up.
Okay, so what's he saying we should be doing then?
He's all about heavy compound exercises, squats, deadlifts, presses.
So back to the basics.
Yeah, those are the foundations. And on a stable surface.
Okay, but what about people who aren't, trying to be like Kevin Durant? What about just normal people?
Well, think about it. Every time you get up from a chair, you go up the stairs, you're using those muscles, right?
I guess so.
So by building that strength, it's not just about performance. It's about making everyday life easier.
And hopefully avoiding injuries.
Exactly.
So it's like an investment.
Yeah, you're investing in your body.
This is good stuff. So we've talked about the bad, the limited range of motion, the unstable surfaces, all that.
Right.
And now we're talking about like the good, the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But, everybody's different. What about people who maybe they've got injuries, they can't do all that?
He talks about that. He's big on those basic lifts, but he says individual programming, that's key.
So it's not one size fits all.
No, not at all. He says find a good coach, a trainer, someone who can look at you, see how you move, figure out what you need.
And make a plan just for you.
Exactly.
Makes sense. So heavy lifting is good, but, be smart about it.
Sure.
Don't just jump in if you've got some issues. Get some guidance. Okay, so we've got that foundation. But he doesn't stop there, right? You mentioned Kawi Leonard earlier.
Yes, he actually brings in a quote from Kawi Leonard talking about the importance of consistent training.
Consistent. Okay.
Yeah, like year-round, all the time.
Not just when you feel like it.
No, he's saying that's how he got to where he is. It wasn't just talent, it was the work, day in, day out.
So no shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
It's about showing up, even when it's tough.
Exactly.
Okay, we're going to have to dig into that Kawi Leonard effect,
We definitely should.
that whole mindset thing. But first, I want to go back to these, these fancy exercises that he was critiquing earlier, the like Instagram famous stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He seemed pretty fired up about that.
He was. He basically says this whole thing, this safe, slow, and light training, he thinks it's actually bad for athletes.
Really? But what's wrong with going slow and controlled? Like, isn't that how you avoid getting hurt?
He says it doesn't prepare you for the real world. Like, sports are fast, life is fast, things happen.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to react.
So it's more than just avoiding injuries. It's about being able to handle the unexpected.
Exactly.
Like being strong enough to bounce back from whatever gets thrown at you.
If you're always training slow and predictable, your body gets used to that.
Yeah, it gets lazy.
But life is not predictable.
That's the truth.
You got to be ready for anything. To change direction, to absorb impact, to move fast.
So he's saying these slow motion exercises aren't going to cut it.
All right, you got to train the way you want to perform.
Makes sense. But I'm still kind of stuck on the balance thing. Like, I've heard it can be good for preventing injuries.
He's not saying balance is always bad. It's about context. What are you training for?
Right.
Remember, we talked about balance versus stability.
Yeah.
Standing on one leg on a BOSU ball might help your balance right there, right then.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're stable when you're moving in the real world.
Oh, I see. So it's like you can balance in a controlled environment, but that doesn't translate to real life stability.
Right. He says athletes need strength and stability through a full range of motion under load.
To be able to handle whatever comes their way.
Exactly. Not just look good standing on a wobble board.
Okay, that makes way more sense now. So we've talked about the bad exercises, we've got the good exercises, but I want to hear more about this idea of like reactive training.
Yeah, let's dive into that. It all comes back to this concept of the body as a system of biological springs.
Biological springs, all right? I'm intrigued.
It's pretty fascinating, and it explains a lot about how we move and how we can train to be more resilient.
Let's do it.
So biological springs, it's kind of like thinking about your body in a whole new way.
Yeah, break it down for me, like I'm 5.
All right, so think of it this way. Your muscles, your tendons, ligaments, all that stuff, it's like a network of springs, all connected.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And when you move, they stretch, they contract, storing energy, releasing energy. That's elastic energy, and that's what lets us move powerfully, efficiently.
So the springier we are, the better we can do all the things.
Yeah. And less likely to get injured.
Right. That makes sense.
But here's the thing, right? If you only train those springs, like in a short range, they get kind of stiff, they lose that adaptability.
Oh, okay. So it's like you're only using a tiny part of the spring.
Yeah, exactly. They can't recoil as fast, They can't absorb the shocks as well.
So going back to your car analogy,
Yeah.
it's like driving with bad shocks.
Yeah.
Right. Everything is bumpy and jarring.
Perfect analogy. You got it. And a body with like poorly trained springs,
Yeah. Yeah.
more likely to break down, get hurt.
So how do we fix that? More squats, more deadlifts.
That's a big part of it. Those big lifts, they build strength, stability, the whole kinetic chain.
Right.
But it's not just about being strong, right?
Right.
It's about that reactive muscle control too. Being able to like switch from contracting to relaxing quickly.
That's where those high tension exercises come in. The ones you mentioned before.
Exactly. So things like plyometrics, jumps, bounds, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And Olympic lifts.
Yeah, those are intense.
Right. All about accelerating, decelerating quickly, training those reactions.
So strength plus speed.
Yeah. You got to be able to explode, Yeah. Because in sports and life, you don't have time to think.
Right.
It's all reaction.
And if you haven't trained for it?
You're not going to be ready.
Okay, that makes sense. But not everyone can just jump into that stuff, right? I mean, some people are starting from scratch. Maybe they have limitations. Is it safe for everyone to be doing these explosive movements?
Good question. And like anything, start slow, listen to your body.
Right.
If you're new to plyos, to Olympic lifts, start basic, build up over time. Don't go crazy right away.
Yeah, slow and steady.
Yeah.
And this is where a coach can be helpful, right?
Big time. Especially if you've had injuries,
Yeah.
They can modify things, make sure you're doing it right for you.
Okay, so heavy lifting, good. Plyometrics, good.
Yeah.
But be smart, get some help if you need it.
Exactly. Don't just watch a video online and try it.
Definitely not. All right, so we've covered a lot. Full range of motion, balance versus stability, all these exercises. But I want to talk about Kawi Leonard again. The Kawi Leonard effect.
Let's do it. I think that's a huge part of this whole discussion.
Yeah, we're getting into the mindset now.
Right. It's not just the physical stuff, it's the mental game too.
I'm ready. Bring on the inspiration. So we've talked about, building that strong body, the springs, the lifting, all that.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about this Kawi Leonard thing. What was it about his approach that stood out to you?
I think it's his consistency. He's always on,
Right.
Not just training hard during the season, but all year round. He gets it.
Yeah.
Real success, it's not about, just going crazy for a little bit. It's about showing up every day, even when you don't feel like it.
Like that discipline, so easy to get caught up in those, quick fixes, the hype. Yeah. But it's the everyday grind that gets you there.
And that discipline, it's not just about the physical stuff, right? It's about building that mental toughness, too. Kawi, he's known for being so calm, so focused under pressure.
Yeah.
That's just as important as how much you can lift.
So how do we get some of that Kawi Leonard effect in our own lives?
Right.
Whether we're athletes or just trying to reach our goals, what can we do to build that mental resilience?
Oh, well, one thing that's really powerful is visualization.
Okay.
Athletes use it all the time, to mentally rehearse.
Oh, yeah.
See themselves succeeding in those tough moments. But anybody can use it to build confidence, prepare for those challenging situations.
So if I'm nervous about a presentation at work,
yeah,
I can picture myself nailing it.
Exactly. The more you visualize it, the more you train your mind to handle it,
Interesting. What about self-talk? Like, athletes use those positive affirmations and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Self-talk is huge. It's like how we talk to ourselves, it really shapes what we believe, what we do.
For sure. If you're always putting yourself down, it's going to show up in your performance.
Exactly. So instead of saying, like, I'm going to mess this up,
Right.
you say, I got this, I'm prepared.
Even if you don't quite believe it yet.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Right, right. It might sound cheesy, but like you're training your brain.
Totally.
So we've got visualization, we've got self-talk, anything else we can do to build that mental resilience.
Mindfulness stuff can be really helpful, like meditation, breathing exercises, helps you manage stress, stay focused. You learn to be more aware of your thoughts,
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be a game changer when things get tough.
So it's not just about the physical training, it's like training your mind too.
Exactly. That's what I love about this whole conversation. It's like holistic approach,
Yeah, it's the whole picture. It's not just about lifting more weight or running faster. It's about being resilient, inside and out.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So train smart. Be consistent. Listen to your body. Don't be afraid to question what you see out there,
Yeah.
and find experts who can help you along the way.
For sure.
But most importantly, remember, it's not just about being physically strong. It's about, that mental toughness, the dedication, believing in yourself.
And I'm going to leave you with one more thing to think about. We talked a lot about, training the body, training the mind. But what about community? The people around you.
Yeah.
How does that play into it? Having people who support you, who push you.
Yeah, like finding your tribe.
Exactly.
Your training partners, mentors, friends, all that.
Because that support system, it makes a difference.
Huge difference. All right, so there you have it. Don't be fooled by those fancy exercises. Stick to the fundamentals. Train smart, be consistent. Listen to your body. It's not just about the physical. It's about the mental game too. And find your people. What will you explore further on your journey?
I encourage you to think bigger, beyond the specific exercises. What are the principles here?
Yeah.
And how can you apply them to your training, your work, your relationships, to everything?
That's all for this deep dive. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing your boundaries. Until next time, happy training.